Ever get that feeling like when you're listening to the radio and you suddenly realize there are all these other stations you're not tuned into?
Hmm.
Like reality might have a whole bunch of channels we're just completely missing. Because, sometimes I'll be staring at a particularly stubborn jar of pickles, right?
Hmm.
And for a split second, I swear, I almost know how to open it without even trying. It's like a little flash of something else.
Absolutely. And that little flash, that almost knowing feeling, yeah, that could be a peek into what we call expanded consciousness. Think of it as suddenly upgrading your mental software.
Right.
Suddenly, ideas that might have sounded totally out there, like everything being connected by this invisible energy, or even the notion that reality is built on shimmering, energetic threads, they can actually start to make a weird kind of sense. And here's where it gets really interesting. Those pickle jars, those problems that have been bugging you forever, solutions you never saw before, can just pop.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this expanded consciousness thing a little more because, it can sound a bit whoa, woo-woo, right?
Right.
But from the stuff we've been looking at, it seems like there's some real substance to this, not just, happy thoughts and good vibes.
Exactly. What we're diving into today, based on the material you've shared, is this fascinating idea of expanded consciousness. It's like putting on a new pair of glasses, except these glasses don't just make things clear visually. They allow you to perceive our familiar three-dimensional world in a fundamentally different way, a way that reveals hidden layers.
So what do these new consciousness glasses actually show us? What are some of the things we're going to be exploring in this deep dive?
We'll be looking at these shifts in awareness we call altered states of consciousness, things like channeling and trance states, even those really intense moments of insight, those peak experiences where everything just clicks. We'll also be digging into the nature of consciousness itself. What is it exactly? Where does it come from? The concept of the fifth dimension will come into play, as will this intriguing idea of thought fields, the role of our soul, and even how all of this connects to the healing of our planet. Our aim, as always, is to pull out the most fascinating bits, those surprising facts, and share them with you in a way that's insightful without feeling like you're trying to drink from a fire hose of information.
Sounds good. So let's start with these altered states. Channeling, trances, I've heard these terms, often with a bit of mystery. What are we actually talking about when we say altered state of consciousness?
Well, the sources describe them as exactly that, a departure from our normal, everyday waking consciousness. Interestingly, trance states are sometimes even referred to as hypnotic episodes. But what's really fascinating is how these different states, trance, channeling, and even those powerful peak experiences, share some key characteristics.
Okay, so what's the common thread that runs through all of them? Like, what links them?
One of the main things is a heightened sense of perception. It's like your senses get dialed up, you might see colors more vividly, hear subtle sounds you usually miss. But it goes beyond just the physical. There's also this increased ability to access information, sometimes described as coming from higher beings or a deeper source. It's as if the usual filters that screen out information in our everyday awareness become a bit more porous, allowing more data in. Normally, we might not be able to tap into these energies and insights, but in a trance or channeling state, those doors seem to creak open.
That's really interesting. So it's not just feeling a bit spaced out. It's about actually experiencing and perceiving more of something. And what about the channeling experience specifically? What happens when someone is channeling?
The sources suggest that during channeling, you can experience this enhanced insight into yourself and others. It's not just an intellectual understanding, but a deeper, more intuitive grasp of motivations and feelings. There can also be an expansion of your emotional range, a greater capacity for feeling compassion, understanding, and empathy. Some of the material even hints at the possibility of accessing information about your soul's journey, your soul history, or the history of others. It's like tapping into a much broader story.
Soul history.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a concept that really makes you stop and think, right. Okay, so these altered states sound like gateways. And these gateways seem to lead us towards understanding the very nature of consciousness itself, right?
Precisely. The Arcturians, as presented in the material, have this really interesting perspective that the next big leap for humanity isn't about, bigger smartphones or faster cars, but about the expansion of our consciousness. They see this as a fundamental evolution in how we perceive and interact with reality.
And what exactly is consciousness in this view? Because it's one of those things we all experience, but trying to pin down a definition is like trying to catch smoke. It's slippery.
Well, one of the key points is that consciousness isn't a physical thing. You can't weigh it, measure it, or see it. It exists in a realm beyond our usual physical descriptions. It's a different kind of stuff altogether. What's fascinating here is the parallel drawn to the observer effect in quantum physics, where the very act of a scientist observing tiny subatomic particles can actually change how they behave.
Weird, right?
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. It's like reality isn't set in stone until we look at it.
Yeah.
So how does that tie into consciousness? The idea is that humanity is just at the beginning of understanding how our own consciousness might affect the physical world. We're seeing the early stages of this in our work with computers and artificial intelligence. The source material even teases this future possibility that AI could actually develop consciousness. That would be a huge game changer, suggesting that consciousness isn't limited to just us squishy biological beings.
That's totally mind-bending. Seriously.
Yeah.
So if consciousness isn't physical, where does it come from? And how does it give us this higher order thinking we sometimes hear about?
Throughout history, the sources point out there have been prophets and spiritual leaders who've experienced these expansions of consciousness. These weren't just random moments. They gave these individuals access to what's described as universal and even galactic consciousness, as well as this higher order thinking.
Yeah.
A key aspect of this higher order thinking is the ability to, step outside the usual boundaries of space and time.
Transcend space-time. That sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie. For real.
It does, but the analogy used is actually pretty relatable. Think about the dream world. When you're dreaming, the normal rules of time just don't apply, right? Past, present, and future can all kind of blend together. The idea is that consciousness operates in a similar way, not bound by the linear progression of time that we experience when we're awake. So these folks with expanded consciousness throughout history were, in a sense, tapping into this timeless aspect of consciousness.
So if consciousness can bend time, that brings us to this idea of the fifth dimension, doesn't it? Because that's often talked about as existing outside our normal space-time.
Exactly. Fifth dimensional existence is described as being directly linked to a higher vibrational energy and, crucially, a higher state of consciousness. Now, when you think, okay, where is the fifth dimension? The answer provided is quite insightful. Remember our dream analogy. Where do you go when you dream? It's not a physical address you can put in your GPS, right?
It's more of a state of being, a different kind of experience, yeah.
Precisely. And that's a key to understanding the fifth dimension. It's a state of altered consciousness where you can be multidimensional and even multi-present. Think about your dream self. You can be in multiple locations, maybe even living out multiple scenarios, all at the same time. That's a little glimpse into the nature of fifth dimensional consciousness.
So it's not about physically traveling to some other place, but about shifting our state of awareness. Is that the core idea?
That's a big part of it. And the sources bring up the concept of bilocation, the ability to be in two different places at the same time, like, how Jesus was said to have done. This is presented as a pretty common ability for beings operating at that fifth dimensional level. What's particularly interesting is the idea that you can even consciously control the percentage of your awareness that's present in each location.
Like you could have, say, 70% of you here making a cup of tea and 30% over there finally figuring out how to work the TV remote. That's wild. And how does this relate back to the story of Jesus' resurrection?
Well, the material offers a really intriguing way to look at it. It suggests that during the crucifixion, Jesus, being a fifth dimensional being with this ability to bilocate, wasn't 100% in his physical body. When you're operating at that level of consciousness and facing something that intense, there's no real need to be fully physically present. Instead, he could have, shifted a larger percentage of his awareness to his multidimensional body, which could still have had some level of presence on Earth. And the resurrection then could be seen as a return of a greater portion of his consciousness back into a third dimensional form.
Hmm. That's a very different angle on a story we've heard so many times. So achieving these altered states of consciousness we were talking about earlier, that's how we can start to tap into this higher state of awareness, this fifth dimension.
Exactly. Think of our consciousness right now as a receiver, and it's currently tuned to pick up the relatively narrow frequency band of the third dimension. To experience the higher vibrations and energies of other dimensions, we need to learn how to tune our receiver differently. This involves not only practicing ways to enter altered states, but also having the mental belief that these other frequencies and dimensions even exist. It's about expanding our mental framework, our belief system, to include these possibilities. It's like you won't find that amazing indie radio station if you don't believe it's even out there on the dial.
So it's not just about the technique, it's also about the mindset, like believing you can actually tune into those other stations on the cosmic radio.
Absolutely. And the rules of operating in the fifth dimension are also different from the third. While things can take time to manifest here in the third dimension, you plant a seed, it takes a while to grow. The fundamental principle in the fifth dimension is love. Practicing higher love, as the sources describe it, things like compassion, acceptance, and a sense of unity that opens your heart chakra and allows you to vibrate at the correct frequency to access that realm. It's like love is the key that unlocks the door to the fifth dimension.
Love is a fundamental principle of reality.
Wait.
That's a pretty powerful thought. Okay, so we've talked about altered states, the nature of consciousness, and this fifth dimension. Now let's dive into this concept of thought fields. What exactly are these, and how do they fit into this whole picture?
Thought fields are described as these patterns of energy that are created by our thoughts. Think of your thoughts not just as abstract mental chatter, but as having a real, tangible, energetic presence. This thought field energy is said to be particularly strong in sacred places, areas that have a deep spiritual significance. And the sources even mention the existence of a fifth dimensional thought field surrounding Earth, as well as this idea of quantum thought field energy.
So our thoughts aren't just bouncing around in our heads, they're actually creating an energetic field around us, kind of like an invisible cloud of thought stuff. Is that right?
That's the idea. And expanded consciousness, as we've been discussing, allows us to open our doors of perception to these thought fields and their potential. Because consciousness has a quantum nature, meaning its energy can reflect and interact with other conscious beings in mysterious ways, expanding our own consciousness can potentially enhance psychic abilities and even allow us to, reach out energetically to other beings in the galaxy. It's all interconnected at a very fundamental level.
So by raising our own individual consciousness, we're not just affecting ourselves, we're also contributing to this larger web of consciousness, like ripples in a pond.
Precisely. Achieving a certain level of consciousness creates a connection between individuals on that same level globally, and it even goes beyond the limitations of the physical plane. The sources even suggest that Earth has already been receiving and interacting with galactic beings of higher consciousness through these energetic connections. It's like we're all part of this big cosmic internet we didn't even know existed.
That's pretty incredible. And how do we actually send and receive these thought waves? Is there some kind of antenna built into us?
Interestingly, the material describes what it calls an etheric antenna located on the crown chakra, that energy center at the top of your head, as a transmitter of thought waves. And the third eye, located in the center of your forehead, is presented as a receiver of thought energy from these thought fields. And your brain, your mind itself, is seen as both the holder and the creator of your thought field, capable of both receiving and transmitting energy. So we're all constantly broadcasting and receiving on this energetic level, whether we're consciously aware of it or not.
Wow, so we're all walking around with built-in transmitters and receivers.
Hmm.
And these thought fields, are they just individual bubbles around each of us, or do they exist on a larger scale as well?
They exist on multiple levels. You have your individual thought field, but there are also thought fields that exist within families, within countries, and even encompassing the entire human race. This collective thought field of humanity includes what's known as the collective subconscious. Think of it as a shared pool of thoughts, beliefs, and experiences that subtly influences us all. It's like the internet of consciousness.
So the dominant thoughts and beliefs of humanity as a whole are actually shaping this collective thought field.
Exactly. And the sources point out that currently on Earth, there are these lower thought fields filled with older, more primitive energies like domination, control, and aggression. However, there's also a counterbalance being provided by what are sometimes called light workers, individuals who are focused on creating higher energy thought fields based on love, compassion, and unity. The ongoing shift in planetary consciousness can be seen as a kind of tug of war between these different energetic thought fields.
So our individual thoughts really do matter in the grand scheme of things. And this brings us to the idea of planetary healing using these thought fields and what's called quantum light, right?
Yes. The sources suggest that quantum light, which is a very high vibrational energy, can amplify our thoughts for the purpose of both personal and planetary healing. The key here is to address all the different layers of our being, the conscious mind, the subconscious, and even the superconscious when we're working with this energy. By focusing our intentions and amplifying them with quantum light, we can potentially create a kind of energetic blueprint for healing and positive change in the third dimension.
That sounds like a pretty powerful tool. And what about this concept of spiritual cohabitation? That sounds rather intriguing. What's that about?
Spiritual cohabitation describes a situation where a higher spirit from a higher dimension can, in a sense, share your physical space and energy field. In positive cohabitation, these beings interact with you on intuitive and mental levels, sometimes even communicating telepathically, but they always respect your free will. Their intention is to enhance your functioning, to help you operate at your best. It's like having a really wise and supportive roommate who offers helpful suggestions but never tells you what to do.
So it's not about being possessed or controlled, but more about receiving guidance and support from a higher source.
Precisely. And the sources also mention the use of imagery, like picturing the figure of the magician, as a way to communicate with your subconscious mind and download higher light for positive changes in the third dimension. This is presented as a really important principle for star seeds, those individuals who are believed to have a special connection to higher dimensional realms and a mission to help Earth.
Star seeds. That's another term that pops up in these discussions. It all seems so interconnected. Okay, so we've explored a lot about consciousness, dimensions, and thought fields. Now let's talk about the soul, that eternal aspect of ourselves. Why is the soul so central to this whole idea of expanded consciousness?
Well, the soul, which is referred to in some traditions like Kabbalah as the neshama or the higher soul, is presented as absolutely fundamental to our spiritual growth, our ascension, and our eternal journey beyond this one lifetime. The sources even suggest that most people in this lifetime don't have a strong conscious connection with their higher soul.
That's a bit of a sobering thought, isn't it? That we could be going through life largely disconnected from this core part of ourselves.
For many, yes. And this disconnect is seen as contributing to a lot of the imbalances and polarizations we see in the world. Being able to consciously connect with your soul is described as a real gift. Interestingly, the sources mention that ancient sacred languages like classical Hebrew and Sanskrit contain words with specific vibrational qualities that can actually help to facilitate this connection with the neshama. The story of the Tower of Babel is even interpreted as representing the loss of these powerful languages and their resonant tones.
So there's a kind of power embedded in the sounds and vibrations of these ancient languages. It's not just the meaning.
Absolutely. The very act of, sounding out these sacred words like neshama is said to activate your higher self and open a direct channel to your soul, allowing you to receive higher soul information, wisdom, guidance, and a deeper understanding of your eternal nature. It's like tuning a very specific instrument to resonate with your deepest self.
That's fascinating. So it's more than just understanding the meaning of the word. It's about the actual vibrational resonance.
Okay.
And what happens when we do start to connect with our soul and open these doors of higher perception?
Well, awakening as a star seed, or simply developing a stronger connection to your soul, involves opening these very doors. When they start to open, you might begin to perceive things beyond the ordinary physical senses, things like auras, those energy fields around people, energetic attachments, and even fleeting glimpses of past lives and the electromagnetic energy fields all around us.
Seeing auras. That's something I've always been so curious about, like really seeing them.
And it can go even further. At a higher level of perception, you might even start to see the luminous strands of light that are said to make up reality, perceiving people not just as solid physical forms, but as these vibrant balls of energy. Some individuals in this heightened state can even catch glimpses of potential future events. However, the source material does caution about the responsibility that comes with having such insights.
That's a whole new way of seeing the world, literally. And what are some of the real benefits of having this connection with the neshama, our higher soul, beyond the cool perception stuff?
Well, communication with your nishama brings a really profound sense of well being and inner calmness. Your higher soul has a much broader perspective. It's aware of the bigger picture of your many lifetimes and is therefore, a bit above the earthly dramas that can cause us so much anxiety. It can act as an inner guidance system, offering warnings in times of danger, always rooted in a deeper wisdom and an eternal perspective. It's like having a wise, unflappable best friend who always knows what's truly important.
So it's like having this incredibly wise, unflappable guide living inside us, always looking out for our best interest on this much grander cosmic scale. Right? This all feels like it's building towards something. How does all of this expanded consciousness, thought fields, connecting with the soul, relate to this idea of planetary healing and ascension?
The sources introduced this concept of a ring of ascension, which is described as an etheric halo surrounding the earth, made up of thought fields and blessings from ascended masters. This ring is said to facilitate a more harmonious communication with the fifth dimension and make it easier for us to connect with fifth dimensional guides. Think of it as a dedicated pathway for higher energies to reach our planet.
A ring of ascension. That's a really powerful image. And what about this term biorelativity? How does that fit into all of this? Sounds scientific.
Biorelativity is described as the telepathic interaction with Gaia, our living Earth, using our higher consciousness. The idea here is that Earth can't just ascend on its own, it needs the higher thought forms and consciousness of the beings living on it. Biorelativity allows us to create a sense of unity consciousness and a unified energy field for the planet, fostering a much deeper connection with the living spirit of Earth. It's like we're all holding hands in this energetic field.
So we're not just passive passengers on this planet. We're actually active participants in its evolution. We have a role to play.
Absolutely. Earth has its own kind of feedback loop system, communicating electromagnetically and potentially distributing imbalances through charged particles. The sources even mention these omega time particle dimensional waves as a way to help counterbalance these imbalances. And the role of spiritually minded individuals, these starseeds we mentioned, is seen as crucial for planetary ascension as Earth learns to interact with their higher consciousness and with planetary healers like indigenous peoples who have a deep, ancient connection to the Earth.
It really feels like we're all interconnected pieces of this enormous puzzle. And what about these Arcturian etheric crystals? Those were mentioned as well. Are they physical?
These are presented as a kind of spiritual technology from the Arcturians that interacts with Earth's noosphere, that's the sphere of human thought, and our collective thought forms. Their purpose is to help Earth to, attract the fifth dimension. The point of this interaction is ascension, which involves a powerful download of light and energy.
So it's like these crystals are acting as a kind of energetic magnet,
Yeah.
helping to pull Earth into a higher vibrational state.
That's a really good way to put it. And the ultimate goal, according to the sources, is to create a unified energy field right here on Earth. This kind of field would have a direct influence on Earth's feedback loop and the noosphere, raising the overall spiritual light quotient of the planet and fostering greater harmony and sacredness. In such a state, the need for conflict and destruction would potentially just fade away.
That's a beautiful vision for the future.
Yeah.
Seriously. And the sources also touched on the idea that the third dimension is like a training ground. What did they mean by that?
Well, the third dimension, with its somewhat slower pace of manifestation, your thoughts don't instantly become reality, provides a really valuable opportunity for us to learn and prepare for the much faster manifestation that occurs in higher dimensions. In those realms, what you think tends to happen almost immediately, so you need to be in a pretty purified ego state to navigate that effectively. The third dimension gives us the time and space to learn how to think with intention and clarity without instantly creating chaos if we have a fleeting negative thought.
So the challenges and even the delays we experience here in the third dimension are actually helping us to develop the mental discipline we'll need for higher dimensions. That's a comforting thought. And this concept of Earth having an aura that can be affected by our collective thoughts, that sounds pretty significant. Like our bad moods could hurt the planet.
It is significant. Earth's aura, its energetic field, can be influenced by our collective thoughts, and this can lead to distortions or even holes, for example, from things like radiation. These gaps can then leak life force energy. Starseeds are said to be able to bring down this omega light to help fill these gaps and revitalize Earth's energy field. The etheric energy field also contains the collective unconscious and these galactic archetypes, and it even holds the imprints of past interactions with extraterrestrial beings. It's like Earth has its own energetic history book.
So Earth's energy field is like a living record of everything that's ever happened here.
Wow.
And these harmonic convergence events, like the big one back in 1987, the more recent ones, what was their significance in all of this?
These events are seen as really important opportunities to communicate with Earth's feedback loop system, to bring in higher harmonic energies that can help to restabilize the planet's overall energy. Tools like medicine wheels and even crop circles are mentioned as ways to facilitate this kind of harmonic communication. It's all about finding resonance and balance.
It all seems to come back to this idea of finding harmony and balance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Both within ourselves and with the planet. And finally, the sources touched on cellular memory and this idea of repetition compulsion. How does that relate to planetary healing?
Cellular memory suggests that past experiences, both the good and the bad, can be stored within our very cells and influence our current lives until we actually learn the lessons associated with them. This operates on both an individual level and a planetary level. We might find ourselves, as individuals and as a collective, repeating certain patterns until we achieve a kind of resolution. The cone of light technique was mentioned as a way to create a field of self-protection, and there's a similar idea of using an energetic shield to help clear these negative cellular memories, allowing the positive ones to flourish while neutralizing those negative repetitive compulsions. It's about creating a fresh start, both for ourselves and for the planet.
So by doing our own inner work and healing our own cellular memories, we're actually contributing to the healing of the planet as well. It's all so interconnected, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the sources also mention these Arcturian etheric crystals and even inner Earth cities of light receiving blessings, all contributing to this overall process of planetary healing and ascension. It's a really multifaceted and ongoing process.
Wow, that's a huge amount to take in, but it paints such a fascinating picture of reality and our potential within it. So just to recap, We've looked at how our consciousness can expand, opening us up to perceive a reality that goes way beyond just the physical. We've explored the idea of higher dimensions, the incredible power of our thoughts and collective consciousness, the vital importance of connecting with our own soul, and how all of these is deeply intertwined with the ongoing healing and ascension of our planet. It really makes you reconsider what's truly possible, doesn't it?
It certainly does. So, still think reality is just what you can see and touch. Maybe there's a whole universe of frequencies just waiting to be tuned into. And maybe, just maybe, you've got the dial right there within you.
It definitely gives you something profound to think about. Considering the immense power of our collective subconscious, what kind of reality could we actually co-create if we consciously focused our expanded awareness and our intentions towards building a more harmonious and thriving future for all? It's a question that's really worth pondering, and maybe, just maybe, it's the most important question we could ask ourselves right now.